Hi, my name is Andy Larisha, and I'm going to present my final capstone presentation on the topic of aphrodisiacs. So what is an aphrodisiac? An aphrodisiac can be defined as an agent including a food, drink, or drug that induces or arouses sexual desire. Aphrodisiacs have minimal scientific evidence to prove their effectiveness and their targeted use. Nonetheless, they've been used for centuries. Some common aphrodisiacs in Western culture depicted in this image. So we have strawberries, raspberries, pomegranate, oranges, oysters, asparagus, chocolate, and I'm sure there's many more that you've heard of. So the uses of an aphrodisiac. Many plants are deemed an aphrodisiac if they affect the neuromuscular system, causing a stimulation of respiration, increase of blood pressure, and a feeling of well-being. Their main uses are to maintain an erection, to increase libido or sex drive, to enhance sexual pleasure, or to combat sexual dysfunction. Sexual dysfunction is the inability to achieve normal intercourse. So this can include premature ejaculation, retrograded, retarded, or inhibited ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, arousal difficulties, which is a reduced libido, compulsive sexual behavior, orgasmic disorder, and a failure of detumescence, which means that one isn't able to become flaccid after having an erection. Notice that these definitions mainly target men or people with penises. We'll come back to that later. So a history into aphrodisiacs. Aphrodisiac is a term that's derived from Greek culture and the mythology of Aphrodite. Aphrodite is depicted in this image, and she's the Greek goddess of love. But actually, the first record of this term was in the work of 11th century Tunisian scholar Continatus Africus. He translated several of Galen and Hippocrates' work from Arabic to Latin. He then went on to write De Cantu, which had a detailed information about herbs and foods from Arabic medicine that were thought to stimulate sexual desire. So aphrodisiacs then began to boom around the world. The spice trade began in the Middle East, Asia, and Western Europe. Then it created a big surge in the use of medicinal plants as aphrodisiacs from the 13th to the 16th century. European pharmaceuticals started to prescribe aphrodisiac medications for contraception. This became widely accepted in the 16th century because of the really high infant mortality rates and the really low average lifespan of a human. It was also a common belief that the man and the woman must both eject their seeds to conceive, according to Galen of Pergamon. This began the movement for pleasure in men and in women. So European apothecaries continued to sell aphrodisiacs from the 1700s to the 1900s. These were still mostly viewed to have a medicinal property and not used strictly for pleasure. It was not until many scholars started to research these medicinal plants that surged from the spice trade to understand and depict their aphrodisiac qualities. Researchers started to find that some of these medicinal plants were not sexual stimulants, and they did not have the medicinal value that they once thought that they did. The motives for marketing substances as a sexual stimulant has still been questioned and is still being researched today. So I'm going to talk about a few different plants that have been deemed aphrodisiac. So the first is the love bean. It is used as a male aphrodisiac in many parts of the world in many different ways. But also it's used in jewelry and in necklaces. As you can see, it's a small red and black bean. So it's very appealing to the eye, so it's used in jewelry. In India and Pakistan, its seeds are boiled in water or milk and then consumed for aphrodisiac qualities. In East Africa, the fresh root is chewed. On the Ivory Coast, water is extracted from the stems and the leaves. So this can also be used by women, but not as an aphrodisiac, but instead they use it as a form of contraception, in abortifacient, or during childbirth. So as I said, these beans are very pleasing to the eye. So sometimes people consume them and they have a high toxicity, which is kind of on the contrary to the people in these parts of the world that consume them. So there's either a hypothesis that these beans have evolved or adapted to different parts of the world, or people have built a tolerance to tolerate them and consume them. So these have also been studied in the lab. It's been discovered in rats that consumption of the love bean actually decreases sperm concentration, impairs sperm motility, and produces structural abnormalities of the sperm. This can determine that maybe that humans can use this as an aphrodisiac, but it does have evidence of not being successful in procreation if you're trying to have a child, because it does have the harmful impacts on sperm. So next is ginseng. This is used in traditional Chinese medicine as a sex stimulant. It's considered to enhance physical and sexual performance, promoting vitality and increased resistance that comes from aging and stress. So ginseng works as an antioxidant by amplifying nitric oxide synthesis in the endothelium of corpora cavernosa, which is one of the two masses of erectile tissue in the penis and clitoris. Nitric oxide is the neurotransmitter that induces a penile erection. So this is why it has an aphrodisiac effect on the body. Next is yohimbe. It is found in Western Africa and Asia. This plant's really cool because it's the only herb that is listed in the physician's index reference for the use of sexual function. This herb has been commonly used for the past 75 years to combat erectile dysfunction. The United States Federal Drug Administration, or the FDA, has approved this herb as being the first plant-derived drug to use to treat erectile dysfunction in the late 1980s. It is believed to combat impotence because the drug dilates blood vessels to stimulate blood flow. Blood flow to the penis helps the development of becoming erect. It also increases the concentration of norepinephrine in your body. And norepinephrine is also an essential neurotransmitter needed in the formation of erections. There's also been a lot of research on this plant. It has shown that it can improve the effects of erectile dysfunction in studies with patients of chronic illnesses that have erectile dysfunction as a side effect. Yohimbe is also thought to stimulate pelvic nerve ganglia while boosting adrenaline to nerve endings, thus increasing sexual stamina and sensation. It has also been found to prolong erections and stamina in male patients without erectile dysfunction. So this is a pretty cool plant. So our favorite aphrodisiac is chocolate. So I just want to touch on this since this is a common Western culture aphrodisiac. So usually how this is consumed is that the beans are extracted from a tree and boiled, where then the chocolate can be withdrawn from the cacao beans. Cacao used to be known as the food of gods, and it was only consumed by royalty. There's two different hypotheses, I should say, of the aphrodisiac properties in chocolate. The first one is due to chocolate containing tryptophan. Tryptophan is a building block of serotonin. Excuse me. Serotonin is a neurotransmitter that's involved in sexual arousal. So the second hypothesis is the concentration of phenylethylamine in cacao, which is a stimulant that's related to amphetamine. Phenylethylamine is a compound that is naturally released in humans' brains when falling in love. However, this compound is quickly broken down by monoamine oxidase. Overall, chocolate can make one feel good due to the serotonin release when it's consumed, and due to the fact that it is a stimulant. So these are the reasons why it's thought to be an aphrodisiac effect on humans. There's also been research and studies on chocolate, and it was determined, there was a study that determined the association between a human's daily chocolate intake and their individual sexual function. There was a sample of 163 Northern Italian women that were given an anonymous survey to assess their sexual function, sexual distress, and depression. Results showed that women who reported daily chocolate intake had higher female sexual function index score than women who didn't consume chocolate daily. Although when data was adjusted for age, these scores were similar regardless of chocolate consumption. So take with that what you will. So biomedical impact. The idea of botany used as aphrodisiacs has boomed in Western culture. Media has claimed almost every substance to be an aphrodisiac. I'm sure if you Google aphrodisiac online, you could probably find any substance to be listed and labeled somewhere as an aphrodisiac. Historically, if a substance has one good effect on the body, then the population thinks that it's the silver bullet for all conditions. It's common ideology that if a substance is a stimulant, increases blood flow, and creates an overall sense of well-being, that it could be identified as a substance with aphrodisiac qualities, like I stated before. There's also speculation that exotic goods that were marketed as aphrodisiac to target one of Western culture's main society concerns and drive up the hype and prices surrounding the product. Regardless of the motive behind these products, aphrodisiacs have a high level of cultural importance in Western culture. Again, these botanical uses of medicinal plants as aphrodisiacs have little to no scientific evidence supporting them. So as we've seen throughout this PowerPoint, aphrodisiacs are targeted more for a male audience. This comes from the fact that men are stereotypically supposed to have a higher sex drive and women are supposed to be more emotional. As you can even see in this picture, the man is holding a sex sign and the woman is holding a love sign. It is considered taboo in society if women have a high sex drive. Western culture has only recently accepted the idea that women's sexual pleasure is equally as important as a male sexual pleasure. Also, sex education surrounding women's bodies and sexuality is not standardized in the United States and is not taught correctly in the United States. The lack of care surrounding women and their bodies is a viewpoint that has been prevalent throughout history, which accounts for the agent substances being geared towards men and excluding the pleasure principle among women. So future of aphrodisiacs in medicine. I did find a few future studies targeting female sexual dysfunction. So we're moving towards the right direction. There was a study in use of a plant that was very highly considered an aphrodisiac that was used to aid Parkinson's disease. Also, getting drugs to be labeled as aphrodisiacs by pharmacies and in the medical industry. So these are my references. And thank you for listening to my presentation.